Great. So welcome everybody. Thank you so much for being here with us this afternoon. My name is Nova and I'm the Marketing and Communications Coordinator here at NAMI Metro Baltimore. We are super excited to be ending this month of Autism Awareness Month with a couple of great experts on this topic from Shepherd Pratt. I am joined here with Dr. Jason Emajuru and Tom Fliss, who is a social worker and so many other things over at Shepherd Pratt, providing this expert support to people who are impacted by autism. And yeah, we're just going to be kind of diving into some questions about autism in general, what new phenomenon they are seeing in their clinics, and what to just sort of expect if you're supporting somebody living with autism. And of course, this is an open forum where you are welcome to ask questions yourselves. If you're seeking more information, really just use these wonderful speakers as a resource today. So we will be diving into some panel discussion first, and then we are going to go into the Q&A later. So if you can navigate over to the Q&A section, it should be on the bottom of your screen. Feel free to chat a question there, or feel free to just, use the chat box if something really resonates with you that they say. We'd like for this to be as interactive as possible. So without further ado, we will go ahead and get started. So stop sharing my screen. And yeah, please kick us off. Dr. Emajuru, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you, Nova, for that great introduction as well. I think just throughout the talk, just to make it comfortable for everybody and not too formal, I could go by Jason as well too. So that's perfectly fine. But I became passionate about pediatrics early on. My dad's a pediatrician, mom's a nurse from Virginia, but also did a lot of training in the DC, Maryland area as well, and always interested in working with families and systems. My own family, sure all of us have been touched by autism in some way, cousins with autism, but also going and training at Kennedy Krieger and Hopkins allowed me to just do a deep dive into working with families with autism too. So I think that also just helped me just to kind of learn more because the families that you work with, they're the experts and they teach you a lot about autism and yourself, but also keep you up and make you be up on your game as well, because you need to learn about local resources, but then focus on research that is forever just flowing in the autism field. So really just kind of learning about yourself, your blind spots, but then also just leaning on families to kind of help you learn about them so that way you treat them the best way possible. So it's been fun and it's been enjoyable and a learning experience working with families.
That's wonderful. Thank you. And totally hear you, and that resonates with me about just really listening to what the locals are saying and what personal activists are doing too. I mean, it's so important. Thank you. Tom, would you like to introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Hi, guys. I am Tom Fliss. I am not a social worker, though I would like to say that they are amazing and fantastic. And if I'm lucky, then I can hopefully, one day maybe become a licensed social worker as well. But with that, I am a board certified and licensed behavior analyst. I'm also a licensed clinical professional counselor. I'm the clinical director for the Center for Autism at Shepherd Pratt. Also oversee the behavioral team on our inpatient units across both of our hospitals. Gosh, as far as autism goes, started at Shepherd Pratt almost 20 years ago as a student with an interest in general psych, and it was recommended that I start out on our neuropsychiatric unit. And I can tell you from the very first day, absolutely fell in love with working with the kiddos on the unit and their families as well. Learned so much from them, from the families. Learned that the kind of stigma associated with autism, or the things people think about when they think of autism, weren't very accurate. This was 20 years ago. We've made a lot of headway in terms of autism awareness since then. but still a lot of misconceptions out there. So it was really helping individuals learn new skills. I think about a 5-year-old that I worked with that had no language ability whatsoever, actually would speak using one word. And so working with him over the course of a year, by the end of that year, he was speaking full sentences, and not in a rote way, but just speaking kind of, asking for things and getting his needs met, saying mama and dada for the first time, and which was, amazing, especially, for the mom and the dad. So, those are things that, keep me going. It's a new experience every single day. I really love what I do, and I really love working with individuals and families that that have autism or have a loved one with autism.
Wonderful. Well, I'm so glad to be in the presence of two very compassionate people, and sorry for the misrepresentation of your title, Tom, but thanks for rolling with it. I appreciate it. So let's start. Oh, and for those of you who are just joining us, thank you. Welcome. We're really excited. Please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat if you like. We also have a Q&A box at the bottom. So if questions arise you're reminded of something that you have a question about, please use those and we will get to them once we're done with this discussion with Dr. Amajuru and Tom. So hi, that's awesome, you're from London. All right, so let's sort of start at the beginning. What are some of the early symptoms or characteristics of autism spectrum disorder that parents or guardians might see in a child before they're diagnosed?
Yeah, so looking at 0 to 6 months, there's really nothing. Infants with and without autism spectrum disorders generally look the same. We haven't really seen any indication or any markers there. At least that's what the research is showing. Usually 6 to 18 months, that's when we start seeing some of those autism related symptoms emerge. Might see a gradual decrease in like eye contact, social smiles, vocalization. Still unclear whether those are related to autism or just delayed development in general. Could be language delays, but 2 to 3 years, that's usually where we get parents become concerned. They see that something is not quite right. A lot of decreased eye contact, especially and even during those highly motivating situations. Again, language delays, not responding to their name. And when they enter those preschool years, they see their child not interacting with other peers, or not playing, or when parents are even trying to get down and engage in some kind of play activity, their child is kind of playing on their own and not having an interest in kind of that joint attention with their caregiver or others. You might start seeing some repetitive movement as well. So like spinning, dropping, lining up objects, some sensory aversions. Some of this is normal, typical development. I get a lot of questions from parents saying, gosh, my 2-year-old is walking around on their tippy toes, or they're lining up their cars, or they're not talking. Is this autism? And the short answer is no, not necessarily. Walking around on tippy toes and lining things up, especially for a toddler, that is them using their newfound skills in exploring the world. But when you have some of these things in combination with some of the social aspects and maybe some of the repetitive stuff, that's where we would want be seen by a pediatrician and some specialists for sure.
Great. And what sort of happens at these evaluations and stuff? When do parents bring them in?
Yeah, so I would say we typically see that 2 to 4 year age span. Again, kind of earlier on, certainly, families will have concerns and bring in earlier, 12 months and on. But right around that 24-month period, at this point, they're getting a lot of input from teachers, daycare providers, pediatricians. They themselves are noticing that again, something's not quite right. So, we start seeing people reach out right around that age range. But honestly, we see a lot of adolescents and adults coming in too.
Yeah, everything Tom said, and just know that while we're evaluating the child, we're looking for spot on with the absence of things that we're expected to be seeing, like social smiling and eye contact, but then the presence of things that maybe we usually don't see in development. So during the assessments, we're looking for those kind of the absence of certain traits within the presence of traits that we maybe aren't expecting to see at certain ages as well. Like, because kids do typically maybe have repetitive hand movements, especially under the age of 24, but then as time goes on, those reduce a bit. And then we're also looking for these certain autistic traits in the early developmental period, meaning usually seeing these kind of traits occur before the age of 5, 6 years of age. And then during the assessment, we're also looking to make sure that we're not missing anything medically as well, because if there is something that we can do to intervene and treat, we'd want to do that in a timely manner. And then we're also making sure that we're not misdiagnosing, say autism with something else like developmental delay or intellectual disability. So that's kind of what our assessment kind of encompasses, and what we look at as clinicians working with families.
Right. Just like Dr. Emiguro said, it's a lot of direct assessment, a lot of direct testing, a lot of parent interviews. It's fairly comprehensive. We get together, discuss results, have feedback sessions with the family, possible case management afterwards. Really kind of help them up every step of the way during that process.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, it just sounds really holistic in a way. You're thinking of the child as an individual, you're thinking of their interactions with their family and everything too, and you're really helping to guide them, which is great. You're not just kind of, here's what your result is and figure it out, but you're actually helping. That's awesome. To sort of pivot a little bit, what are some statistics that you found to be the most fascinating when it comes to ASD in Maryland? Does anything come to mind immediately?
Yeah, I was looking through, and it's interesting because CDC is almost a kind of gold standard in our national brand for statistics in general, whether it's autism or health related. But I found it interesting that 5 counties were counted only. So out of the 23 that we have in Maryland, only 5. So Cecil County, I think it was Hartford, Howard, Baltimore County, but all of Western Maryland wasn't counted, and all of Eastern Shore wasn't counted. So that's impressive, because those counties are the ones that usually are at risk of having the kids that are within them have delays in diagnosis in a way. So that was one thing that was probably pretty surprising. And then also looking at how most of the 4-year-olds that are in this kind of cohort that CDC is tracking, so 4-year-olds and 8-year-olds, in Maryland, most of them had a diagnosis before the age of 4, so 3 years of age, which is, again, that's a really impressive number, because I think a decade ago, the average age was 4 to 5 in the country. So I think in Maryland, we are doing a better job at maybe diagnosing a bit early. But again, those counties were the ones that were being tracked. So you also kind of have to think that there are some kids that are in the Eastern Shore, Western Maryland, even in PG County too, as well, that are maybe not having timely diagnosis.
I think looking at other statistics, looking at the male female 4 to 1 is an interesting statistic. There's a lot of literature out there and a lot of research kind of looking at females in general, with the feeling that they're largely underdiagnosed, that there's these masking symptoms. where it would be interesting to see, as this research develops, to see, if those prevalence rates change as well.
You both brought up some really interesting points. Tom, I almost wonder if, with the female piece, if that might be because of social conditioning and some things might be more expected, but whereas other things aren't, but that might be going off on a tangent. But to your point, Dr. Majuru, you said that Maryland's been doing a really good job of actually, the evaluations, maybe missing Western Maryland, but we are catching a lot of kids early. How does it compare, with actually getting the evaluation to actually getting connected to the care and the appropriate accommodations? We're doing a good job of identifying, but then what about that next step?
Right. Yeah, that's where the difference is, because it's the difference between getting a diagnosis and then, what are you going to do with, this diagnosis, which is, our healthcare system is complex, as you can imagine. I mean, just to navigate through is pretty problematic. We also know that the condition itself is, excuse me for a minute. The condition itself is also pretty complex as well. I mean, autism impacts so many different aspects of a child's life as well. So you're dealing with that, and then the condition, but then also every individual is unique. They bring their own temperaments, their own families, their own resources that they may or may not have. And so that kind of just is a recipe for the way to navigate to resources being challenging for a lot of families. So we do see that being a problem, not only in Maryland, but also nationally. Families needing to navigate to getting OT, or to getting speech, or to getting a social skills group or behavioral therapist as well. All those different resources can be something that one child needs, which is, again, pretty burdensome and difficult for families. And then we're also seeing families who, not to interrupt, families who are, again, Western Maryland, Eastern Maryland, even inner city Baltimore City, not being able to access those services just because maybe health literacy, financial literacy isn't as prominent in those families in a way too.
Yeah, I would say probably exactly the same thing. Barriers, being access to appropriate treatments is huge in Maryland. Right, there's pockets where there's really not enough resources. You look at ABA services, which have exploded in Maryland in the past 10 years. There's still nowhere enough providers, to meet the demand. So diagnostically, it's happening, but on the treatment end, there's pockets of communities that have no specialized care, and then there's even in those that do, there's not enough.
Yeah, I think we're seeing that across the board, just in general in the mental health field. It's like there's such a need for the care, but not enough providers, and definitely a hurdle that we all collectively could be working towards. So, we've obviously gone over some challenges. Are there any things that parents can do to really help improve outcomes, and what are some positive takeaways for parents?
I think first off is, I always like to just tell the families that I'm working with, whether they have a child with autism or not, is really kind of caring for themselves. We know that analogy of a face mask, putting yours on first versus putting your child's on, but it really kind of just speaks to just them taking care of themselves, whether it's with getting better sleep and exercise, nutrition, engagement with other people in their home or community, or people that they just trust as well. And then talking about just doing things that they like to do, simple pleasures that they do that bring them joy, I think, because that's going to pay dividends to kind of overall just help their own child's physical and mental health and mental well-being. So kind of number one, again, kind of taking care of themselves, so that way they have enough just oxygen to kind of help their child that has this kind of complex condition. And then, when we're talking about outcomes in autism, two of the more, I think, robust findings that we do see in research is a child gaining speech or ability to kind of advocate for themselves, whether that's them having fluent speech, in a timely way, or if they're nonverbal, at least gaining access to some device to kind of help them advocate for themselves is going to be really important for their own just future social well-being. And then also them problem solving and then gaining life skills is really important as well. So we really, that's why during the evaluation, we really kind of make sure that those two things are being assessed and addressed, because we know that those two kind of areas help to improve overall psychological well-being in the future, but also future prospects for maintaining relationships and gaining jobs when they're adolescents and adults as well.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely critical that parents are involved in the entire process. When new skills are developed, parents are continuing to work on those skills outside of those sessions. There's maybe some extremely challenging behaviors, and yes, like I get it. As a parent myself, I'm exhausted, but parents are exhausted. But to work through some of these things, sometimes it's kind of pushing through or finding those resources that can really help out. Because it's the difference between working through these challenges for the next year or two, or for the next 20 years. So yes, parents absolutely critical to outcomes. But yeah, Dr. Emma Drew, absolutely right. Needing to take care of yourself, getting respite. Still going out, having those date nights, and making time for yourself. Absolutely important.
That is something that we echo a lot here at NAMI Baltimore too, which is, especially like for the family caregiver side, you can't pour from an empty cup. So it's really important to make sure that your own personal self-care routine is taken care of. It's too true. What about like when we're thinking about COVID and how we're kind of coming off of it, still living in this COVID-19 world? When we think about parents who maybe have missed out on some treatment and feel that their child is falling behind either in school or in their speech, what can they do to try to catch up, or maybe make sure that their kid or loved one is finding the appropriate care?
Yeah, COVID just it's just impacted everyone, right? And I think one maybe positive nugget for parents to kind of know is the kids are resilient. We know that, and they do bounce back as well. But I think for parents, the biggest thing for them to kind of know is they don't have to be super moms or dads, but they really just need to be the best parent that they can be for their child. I always take this one quote that a famous American psychologist said, every kid needs to have at least one adult figure be irrationally crazy about them. And I think for parents, you're thinking about that, just knowing that you being the best that you can be for your child is going to be enough to kind of for them to weather a lot of storms, even COVID for that matter. And then when COVID is interrupting, say, the child's social skills group or their ability to kind of go in person and see different providers, know that what you do at home as well is just as important, I think. So having strong social engagements with the child at home, these everyday interactions that we see we can see parents provide, continuing to do those and don't feel like it's not enough, because when you're in a social skills group, the most important work comes with what you're going to apply in the child's natural setting. So I think it's really important for parents to know that what you're doing at home, these everyday interactions are important, and don't believe that since COVID has impacted you from reaching these groups, that your child's missing out on a lot.
And I think it's important to point out that this isn't unique to autism. Everyone is behind. So you think about school. Everybody is behind academically. Everybody is trying to catch up. Services are back in place. Families. I spoke with families throughout the pandemic early on, and would hear a lot of guilt or a lot of stress that they are trying to actually follow along with the therapeutic kind of recommendations from the providers, and they're just exhausted and they couldn't keep up, or they're worried that they're doing it wrong. this was a pretty crazy period for everybody, and so my message, I guess, to parents is it's just a reminder that you're doing great. There's everybody was impacted. A lot of these services are back in place, and clinicians are really ready to kind of help the needs wherever your child is at. Guilt-free, there's no there's no shame of like, oh, you didn't do this for this period of time. It was a really difficult time for everyone.
Right, everybody was just learning in the moment. I mean, and,
Yep.
and adapting, and yeah. So what can like a parent, a caregiver, a child expect if they are coming in specifically for an evaluation? Like, what does that process look like? Is it a lot of talking with the kid, playing games, like, or I guess it depends on the age? Enlighten us, please.
Yeah, so at the center, basically, families will come in. We do have a lovely waiting room with lots of toys. We also have a sensory room too. So if you want to get away from all those toys or the noise, you can also escape in there as well. But yeah, so we go through, quite a variety of assessments. A lot of them, especially for the young children, a lot of them are very play and toy based. So that makes it, it's probably about a 2 to 3 day process in terms of testing. It's about 10 to 12 hours of solid testing time, which sounds, like how can a young child, sit through that? But again, when there's a lot of, it's more play-like than it is anything else. So yeah, we go through kind of that testing process. We talk with the families, extensively, through our social workers, our psychiatrists, kind of get this extensive background. We all meet together as a team, and it's a team that consists of, again, psychiatry. We have psychologists, occupational therapist, speech and language pathologist, an education specialist, a behavior analyst, and so forth and so on. And we all get together and we kind of discuss the results and figure out what those recommendations are, have a feedback session with the family, and then offer case management services after that based on what our recommendations are.
Yeah. That's and really, looking at how to best set up this family for success after the evaluation. So we're really trying to figuring out, how a child solves problems. Really trying to figure out how they learn and how their language is and where it is at developmentally. We're also trying to assess their motor skills as well. So we do all this through games if it's a young child, but then also just through maybe age appropriate activities if it's an adolescent and adult as well. And then, once they come to see me, the psychiatrist, I'm really looking to get a sense of if it is autism, okay, what am I seeing that makes me believe that it is with everybody else's information helping me, but also if it's not, then what else could be going on too. So I'm going to assess for conditions like depression, anxiety, ADHD, just a variety of conditions that can sometimes look like autism during certain contexts and situations. So really, the more parents are understanding of what evaluation is going to look like, the better it's going to be for us to kind of really help them. So it's good that's a good question. It's going to really help us just help the parents really navigate their own concerns in a way once they understand what the evaluation kind of looks like, and they can kind of peer through and see what we do. So it's a great question, and hopefully this provides some understanding for people that are listening of what we do.
Yeah, thank you for, kind of giving us a peek into what it looks like. That's awesome. I guess, what sort of community resources are available here in Baltimore for families that are impacted by ASD? Thinking of our low-income families in our communities, and what sort of supports and resources are there for them?
Yeah, I think the first one, especially if they have the diagnosis of autism, you have a connection with DDA, Department of Developmental Service Administration. You are eligible for the autism waiver, which is a great resource, allowing families to kind of get respite services or get other maybe even kind of case management services to kind of help them navigate through just this complex system that we have. We also have Parents Place in Maryland. I think it's in Howard County, but I think they serve all of Maryland, I want to say, but they provide webinars, but also they'll provide special education webinars to kind of help parents navigate through that complex system once their child's in school. We have Pathfinders for Autism. Tom, it's a great programs like the Wikipedia or Google, I like to say, of autism services in Maryland. They do a great job of just giving the family information, but also providing webinars too. And I think the ARC is a national program, but they have a brand in Maryland too. And one of the programs within the ARC that I want to highlight is the SIB shops too, because I think siblings of people with autism do get overlooked sometimes, and they have opportunities for siblings to connect and get together and maybe even feel heard sometimes, because the families and parents are just using all the resources towards their other sibling with autism. And so sometimes it's nice for them to kind of just have a platform to kind of share their experience and maybe even reduce their risk of mental health conditions too.
Yeah, I think Baltimore is really lucky in that we have actually a lot of specialized care and providers. Not enough, but especially compared to some states and some areas that virtually have none. At Shepherd Pratt, we have a ton of resources. People could go on the website and see the variety of things that we provide. We have the Center for Autism, we have schools, vocational training, outpatient. One of the largest adult outpatient providers for those individuals on the spectrum. Yeah, in the state, we have a lot of ABA providers. That's also a huge plus, and highly encourage families to reach out to them. We have local Autism Society chapters as well. So encouraging those families and parents to connect with those groups so that they can connect with other families as well. Really highly encourage families to get involved in. And yeah, again, Pathfinders for Autism, excellent resource. If you need to find a specialized medical doctor, a lawyer, probably even a hairdresser that works with individuals with autism, they have quite the comprehensive list of resources. Families can punch in a zip code and it'll provide them a list of resources nearby.
Wonderful. So let's see, are those the organizations that you just mentioned, places that you would, recommend that people check out if they're like in a waiting sort of period to get into specialty treatment? Like the journey can be kind of long. You first find out, or you're a little bit, you're recognizing some warning signs, early symptoms and stuff, and you want to get your child into care, but you can't quite yet. Are those good organizations to reach out to in the meantime?
Yeah, I think those are. I think another program that that's down in Florida State, but it's a national kind of brand now, Autism Navigator. Dr. Amy Weatherby, she's a speech language pathologist, and she has designed an online tool for parents who are concerned about their child having autism, or for parents who have the diagnosis but they are kind of waiting. So giving them opportunities to learn about how to maybe interact socially, to kind of build social skills, but also ways to kind of increase just life skills for their kids who that 2 to 5-6-year-old range. So that's a great resource. Again, I want to say it again, Autism Navigator. They also have a baby navigator as well, which just really gives parents, educators, health care providers, therapists resources to kind of learn about early signs for autism and what to do with your child who has autism to kind of help build those skills early. So, without maybe even seeing a therapist while you're waiting for one.
One of our participants chatted, name that resource again, please.
Yeah, Autism Navigator.
And then there was the Weatherby person.
Amy Weatherby she's the
Amy
speech language
Weatherby.
pathologist there in Florida State. She designed it, her and her team.
Cool. Awesome.
Yeah, I think, again, connecting with those social communities. So a lot of the stuff that we've mentioned is, also critical and certainly something families can do in the meantime while they wait. There's other events out there in Maryland. There's, I have to check post-COVID, or rather in this phase of COVID, movie theaters would have sensory nights at the movie theaters. And so where the lights are dimmed and the volume is decreased, and it allows for individuals to watch a movie and engage however they would like to engage. So, finding activities and programs like that, I think is great. It's great for the child. It's great for the caregivers to connect with others. Also, always strongly encourage families to some families will kind of isolate their child away from others or different activities. So you'd be surprised at how many recreational sports are absolutely inclusive. And so encouraging families to reach out to those coaches and having a discussion with them. Really having your child engage in kind of all of those activities that are available for that age range. I think that's really, really important as well.
Yeah, it's a great point. Tom, getting siblings again involved, I just want to highlight that families sometimes want to maybe shield siblings because they feel like it may be inappropriate or too much for the sibling. But if it's an older sibling, we do that. Research finds that they provide great modeling for the other sibling, and they provide great abilities to kind of recognize what adaptive skills are, like just making a simple sandwich or a meal for yourself, or getting dressed, or getting out the door. All those things that siblings can model for them. So parents getting them involved to help in that way, just to provide kind of a peer, so to speak, especially if they're close in age, resource. So all those things can be helpful for families who are waiting, just to kind of get the ball rolling.
For sure. I'm seeing we're getting a lot of questions in the chat and in our Q&A. So let's start asking some of those, and then we can kind of you've done a wonderful job. Thank you both for sharing all of this information. All right, one individual is here. Let's start off with this question. How can I get my kid enrolled in Shepherd Pratt? Ideally, I'd like to find a school where there is a BCBA on staff and a psychiatrist that works with the BCBA. Figuring out the dosage and the timing of the medications versus the environment is hard. I feel like I need a school that understands both psychiatry and behavior/learning.
Yeah. So as far as getting, that funding and placement, secured by the local, schools, I would be working with the schools and seeing if the local school system is meeting the needs of their child, and there may be a recommendation for a school such as, one we have at Shepherd Pratt. If families can go on our website and look at our educational resources. And you can see we had Christina who just posted a link on there as well. And yes, our schools have a board certified behavior analyst, also have a psychiatrist, and as well as speech and language and occupational therapy and a whole bunch of other really extremely valuable services and resources.
Somebody just asked, any recommendations for the best Spanish-friendly resources for autism, asking for a new nonprofit?
is
So any recommendations
for the best Spanish-friendly resources for autism? Sorry.
This is a great question. Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I would want to think Autism Speaks should be very Spanish friendly. It's a national brand, and they're really prominent in places around the country that have increased Hispanic populations like Texas and California. But I think that's one big one that I would know. But it's a question that I think I could also just look up and figure out too as well. So, Tom, do you know some?
Yeah, and we'll be following up after that. Sorry, Tom. We'll follow up after this and send over the link to the recording and additional information as well, so you can have it.
Yeah, I think Autism Speaks, they have a lot of resources. They translate to other languages as well. But it is it is difficult. I know for example, for a Polish family that I was working with, trying to find resources is difficult, and that's certainly that's certainly a barrier and something that certainly needs improvement overall, nationwide. Yes.
So we got another question that says, when and how do you do genetic counseling? Or when would that come into play?
Yeah, so our national academies, pediatrics, child psychiatry, American Medical Genetics Academy also, they all recommend genetic testing for individuals who are diagnosed with autism. And because our genetic testing is getting more advanced, but also getting older. When I mean older, meaning it's been around for a long time, a lot of insurance companies are going to be able to cover it if you are able to kind of provide a letter to them stating why it's medically necessary in a way. So any kid diagnosed with autism, it should be a part of the standard practice to screen for any genetic conditions that may be causing autism. So it's a national standard practice.
Thank you. We got a question earlier from somebody over at Carroll County Head Start, and they're the disabilities coordinator at the center, and they're creating a sensory room at their site and would like some recommendations on materials that you would suggest using there.
Yeah, so I would highly suggest a variety of materials that can also be adjusted. So some, I think this is where, some of those kind of stereotypes come along, where it's like, some kids, kids on the spectrum, like it to be super quiet. And that can and is absolutely true at times. There are some that really enjoy a lot of noise, just like everybody else. So I think having a variety of different sound machines to kind of play ambient noise, having a lot of tactile type stuff. So we have like kind of giant soft bean bags so that they can kind of sink into, but also other materials. You could post things on walls that have kind of be able to touch a variety of different textures. Lighting, being able to adjust the lighting, so making it dark. Usually try to stay away from kind of those fluorescent lights, but just having the capability of dimming noise. So really kind of across the senses, being able to, I think the key there is being able to adjust to different degrees, depending on what the individual likes.
I love that response. It's just sort of like put whoever it happens to be in there first and whatever their needs are, and make sure that, you kind of cater to that. And then also, I mean, I personally just have a thing against fluorescent lights too. So I love that you're suggesting not having those. Cool.
for those with fluorescent lights, because I know sometimes we don't have an option. You could put, there's these shades you can put over the fluorescent lights of different colors, and so that's always a good idea and a workaround, as well in terms of fluorescent lighting.
That's awesome. Yeah, good luck with making the your site. That sounds really cool. Let us know how it goes. So let's pivot back. If anybody has any additional questions, feel free to chat them on in. We'll get to them when we can. We just have a couple more questions to go through. So let's see. We've kind of touched on this a few times with just how important it is to have that social connection, getting involved in sports and all of that sort of stuff, or any kind of activity, and not necessarily letting a diagnosis of autism be a barrier to that sort of very important community connection. For adults living with ASD, what are some of the most helpful interventions that can help sustain wellness and that sense of connection?
I think, again, a focus on social groups. Children they grow up, they grow up in the school system, and the community. So they're, around other kids, they're around teachers and other people a great deal of time. After they graduate, all of that kind of drops off, unless they go to college. Or get a job, but a lot of those assistants and those resources kind of drop off, which is unfortunate, and really a huge problem. But there are social groups out there, colleges, helping individuals on the spectrum as well, kind of giving accommodations. Towson University actually is a great one. They have the Hussman Center for Autism, and they set up a lot of social outings and groups. It's quite an amazing center over there. And having more kind of therapeutic-based groups, such as peers, is kind of a social skills development type of model. Getting vocational training, finding work that is meaningful, though, it really, a lot of that falls on employers and on the community in general. For us to be, to adapt and also be inclusive as well.
So much work to be done over there, just in workforce mental health in general, and raising awareness and making sure that we're having conversations about it. And it's absolutely critical, especially after COVID-19. So we just got a question in the chat. Learning about Alzheimer's, I learned about sundowning. Does this relate to autism /ADHD /depression? Recommendations?
Yeah, I don't think it there's a correlation there or relation there. I think it's a different kind of phenomena specific to Alzheimer's, but at the same time, it does bring it's a nice segue into what the last question that we talked about with adults, because I think from a prevention standpoint, one of the biggest things that we can do to have adults be set up for success is to reduce just the burden that other mental health conditions that they have with them in adolescence and childhood carries on into their adulthood. So, reducing the comorbidity of anxiety or ADHD or depression can just help with just them being able to stay in an employment or gain employment and succeed when they're doing the interview process, or not fall out because they're just so worried about their social interactions and unpredictability of things. It also helps them just be able to do a better job at doing those adult life skills that we expect adults to do, like getting a license, driving, maintaining relationships, all the things that I think everybody wants to be able to do in adulthood, have autonomy and have an ability to dictate their lives is really important. So focusing on those conditions that the person who raised that question, focusing on those conditions is really important in childhood and in adolescence, and so that way we just have better outcomes in adulthood.
Do you want to add anything, Tom?
No, I think Dr. Amadou had
Great.
all the answers.
That was an awesome question. So what I guess, and again, feel free to drop a question if you have another one. We have a few minutes left. But as we're sort of wrapping up, you kind of mentioned this just now, Dr. Amajuru, the community plays a really vital role. What are some things that we can all do to just help support people living with autism?
Yeah, great question, and kind of speaks to just, what can we do to just make them feel comfortable and valued as well. And, we have to kind of admit that just the world that we've kind of built is pretty noisy and unpredictable and chaotic, and it just leads to a lot of kids that I've seen just spiral in a hurry, especially when they're waiting for these services to kind of kick in, or they're in service and they're waiting services, but they're waiting for just the skills to kind of kick in, and what can families do to kind of help. But really, I think the biggest thing is to just have them feel valued, and somewhat of a nebulous thing to think about because it's so vague, but really just maybe it's just letting them have a voice, letting them have advocacy groups like the Autistic Self-Advocacy Network is a great organization, grassroots, that's really just created a voice for autistic people. And I think Silicon Valley and other organizations are also recognizing that maybe we don't have to always value social strengths of people, and because we know that could be a barrier for them getting into an interview, because we know that during interviews we highlight social strengths, and that kind of gets people through the front door, but maybe highlighting just the computational skills and visual spatial skills that a lot of autistic people have as strengths. So I know a lot of Silicon Valley programs are having a pipeline and really looking for people with autism or those strengths to kind of be a part of their program. And I think it really it's nice when you are working with somebody side by side that is not like you and is autistic or non-autistic, and you really, I think that kind of just helps to kind of break down stigma in a way when you're feeling valued in a community like that, since we kind of value work in employment in this country, right? So if somebody is working in their employee, they're able to feel like they're a part of society in a way.
Yes, and really just focusing on the strengths. I think you hit the nail right on the head. They might have skills that aren't just like something that come up in a job interview, but really taking the time to get to know an individual, I think, and just keeping an open mind. And yeah, that's awesome. We got another question in the Q&A that says, what are some symptoms that may be recognizable in girls and girls of color that might be seen past masking behaviors? Asking since this group is often not diagnosed or is misdiagnosed. A really good question.
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't think the research with kind of masking, camouflaging, and just gender and autism is really limited. And I think now more people are bringing it into light, but I don't necessarily know if there's maybe certain kind of characteristics that girls of color with autism we see, but we do know, whether from expert kind of opinion, but also just some research, that girls do just present with reduced repetitive behaviors or intense interest. They're able to kind of mask that a bit more, right? They're able to kind of hide it a bit more, but they may present with more sensory sensitivities to like light, sound, textures in a way. And when they are maybe put on the spot to show their social abilities, they're a little bit worse than boys that we do find. So in research, the girls have a little kind of worse social communication skills than boys do. So those are the things that we do see kind of in research. But yes, the masking piece and the social pressure that's put on girls, maybe more so than boys, really increases their need to kind of mask and camouflaging and be with the tribe and run with the pack in a way, versus boys maybe have a little more runway to kind of be quirky and unique and different, just because I think we expect girls to act a certain way, especially in conservative families or areas too.
Thank you so much for bringing that question to our attention. I really appreciate it, and perfect response, Dr. Amajuru. I mean, do you two have any other, last words that you would like to share with everybody here today?
I think this is a really important topic. I think it's really important to remember that this is a pervasive thing that occurs across the lifespan, and so there's a lot of focus, obviously, on children and young kids and adolescents, but really remembering that this goes on through adulthood as well, and so really trying to build those resources and talking to local government and trying to build up that support is still highly needed. I will give a shout out to Katie Gandy, who is our state's first autism coordinator. She is doing excellent work, and she has a lot on her plate, but I know she is starting to really develop some programs, and I'm really looking forward to see what comes out of that.
Yeah, ditto. And I don't have much else to add, just letting families know there's just little things that you can do in the home that can pay dividends and is just as effective as certain services as well, right? It's really just about that kind of connection between you and your child and what you guys do in the home, and ensuring that family members too as well, that you have a village to kind of help you out and making sure everybody's on the same page when it comes to the diagnosis and what to do about the diagnosis too. So I think that's really big. Just communication with the family is flowing, and it's a coherent message that everybody's sharing as well.
Well, thank you too so much for all of the information that you've shared today, and for your expertise and just for being here. We really appreciate it. And thank you all for joining this call today and for asking such wonderful questions. I mean, you helped us dive even deeper than we were expecting to. So thank you for your thoughts, and we hope that you keep in touch with NAMI, with Shepherd Pratt. We'll be following up with a thank you note later and a link to the video probably early next week. So stay tuned for that. And please don't hesitate to reach out if you do have any further questions. We are always happy to connect you to more mental health resources in the community. So I hope everybody has a good weekend. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.